Today we're going to talk about what the Electoral College is, how it works, because that's how we're going to pick our president this November, and why it pushes out third parties. Hi, I'm Tokyo, and welcome to my newish YouTube channel. You might already know me from TikTok or Instagram or Threads, or even way back in the day, Twitter, but my mission has always been the same, and that's to get voters on the left quick, informative content that keeps you in the know and empowers you to get involved. Now, what exactly is the Electoral College and why do we use it? Well, the Electoral College is a process. It's the process by which we pick our president. Now, it is the only election in the United States where we use this process. Every other election, just whoever wins the most votes wins. But for the president, we use the Electoral College. How the Electoral College works is detailed in the Constitution in Article 2. You can always read it if you want to. But the key thing about the Electoral College is that it requires that the winner of the presidential race be the person that wins the majority of the Electoral College votes. I need you to remember that because that's going to become important later. Now, if you're like me and you don't like the Electoral College, the reason why we can't get rid of it is because it is in the Constitution. To change or get rid of the Electoral College would require a constitutional amendment, which essentially means that Congress, so the House and the Senate, would have to pass a bill that the president signs, but then you need 3/4 of the states. You need at least 38 states to ratify it, which means each of those states' legislatures would also have to pass a bill to ratify that amendment before we could use a different process to pick the president. That's why we're using the Electoral College for this November, because any kind of process for a new constitutional amendment is going to take time. So how do we determine how the electoral votes are distributed? So each state, the number of electoral votes that they have is a combination of the number of senators they have and the number of House representatives that they have. We know every single state has 2 senators. So like in California's case, they have 2 senators. Wyoming, they have 2 senators. Now, from the representatives, California is a huge state, so they actually have 52 House representatives, whereas Wyoming, as a very small state, only has 1. So when we're figuring out how many electoral votes each state has, it's a combination of those 2 numbers. That's why California has 54 and Wyoming only has 3. If you add up all 50 states, and then the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., gets 3 Electoral College votes. When you add them all up, the total is 538. Okay, so it's election night. And in your state, after all the votes have been counted, whichever presidential candidate won the most votes in your state wins all of your state's electoral votes. There are 2 states that have an exception, that's Maine and Nebraska. We're not going to talk about that, but just so that you know, generally speaking, every other state, it's a winner takes all. So if your state picks Trump, they get all of the Electoral College votes. If your state picks Biden, they win all of the Electoral College votes. If you're curious how many electoral votes your state has, here is a map with the current distribution of Electoral College votes. Now, how many Electoral College votes do you need to become president? Remember earlier in the video when I said the Constitution requires that the winner receive a majority of, not the most, but the majority of Electoral College votes. So to find out that number, we know that 538 is the total number of electoral votes. We divide that by 2. That gets us to 269. A majority is just one more than that, 270. So we're all used to seeing a graphic kind of like this one on election night, right? With the bar, and in the center there's usually a little hatch mark that says 270 to win. So whoever gets to 270, that's the majority, they are the winner. Now, why are the swing states so important when it comes to the Electoral College? Well, because every state is a winner takes all, the parties, in this case I'm talking about the Republican and the Democratic parties, will pick and choose which states they're going to invest in. There are some states that are either so red or so blue, the parties they're not going to waste their money trying to flip a state. There is absolutely no reason why the Democratic Party is going to run into Utah and try to flip that state. Just like the Republicans aren't going to be flocking to California to try to flip that state. The wins were so lopsided in those states, that's why the parties are going to focus on those states that it was really, really competitive. Those competitive states are what we call the swing states. Every year, every presidential election, which swing states are the swingiest always changes a little bit, but for this year we know the main ones. The main ones will be Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia. And while we're on the topic of swing states, if winning the White House for the Democrats is one of your goals this November, then I encourage you to get involved in the swing states and turning out voters in those 6 states. Now, if you're not sure exactly how to do that, don't worry, I've got plenty of ideas for you, and I've put them in a link down in the description below. So why does the Electoral College process disadvantage third parties? In a nutshell, the answer is the Constitution and money. Before I delve into that a little bit, though, I want to be clear. I think that more voices and more points of view in a democracy is a good thing. I think we get to better overall solutions when we consider many different kinds of points of view. And remember, the Electoral College process is only about the presidency. Third parties can win any other seat, governor, House seats, your mayor, any other seat, but the Electoral College process in particular just boxes out the third parties, and let's get into that a little bit. Remember when I said that the Constitution says that you must win a majority of the votes. So let's say for whatever reason we had a third party candidate that ends up winning a handful of states, right? Well, a handful of states doesn't get you the win, right? Even if you had the most states, you still don't win. You have to get 270 votes in order to win the presidency. So that's the Constitution. Again, if it was the most Electoral College votes, there probably would be a way where third parties could be a little bit more competitive. The second problem, though, for third parties is just money. And until money gets out of politics, it's going to continue to be an issue for third parties. So in a nutshell, when we talked about the swing states, the 2 biggest parties, the Republican and the Democratic parties, have a huge organization and apparatus to help them raise a lot of money. And as much money as they raise, they still, when it comes to the presidential election, only focus on the swing states. They don't focus on the other states because they're going to either be solidly red or solidly blue. They work on the swing states because they have the best chance in the world to try to flip them. A third party would need enough money to beat out the other 2 parties in the swing states so that they could win the swing states, and then they would need to have enough money to win. I figured it out one day. It was about the 18 next most competitive states. So those are the ones that the Democrats and Republicans already figure are either solidly blue or solidly red and aren't even competing in. A third party would need enough money to be able to flip those next 18 states to the third party. And there is no amount of money that a third party can raise to make that happen. What happens if nobody gets to 270 votes? So let's say in the very unlikely scenario that a third party came in and won a handful of states and deprived both the Republican and the Democratic candidates from getting to 270. There's also the very weird possibility that even just with the 2 candidates, they could split the Electoral College where it would be 269 to 269. In a tie, again, the Constitution says you need to win a majority of the Electoral College votes. That would mean that we'd have to go to Plan B. And what does the Constitution say in Article 2? What is that Plan B? They scrap the Electoral College votes entirely, and they let the House of Representatives decide. That's right. If nobody gets to 270 votes, the House of Representatives gets to decide who becomes president. The way that they do that is every state gets 1 vote. So in my state of Oregon, right, we have 6 representatives. 5 of them are Democrats and 1 of them is a Republican. So my state, there would be a single vote for the Democratic candidate. But when you do that across all of the states, remember the reason why Democrats are often disadvantaged in the Electoral College is because we're more concentrated. Our populations are more concentrated in some of the bigger states, and we're less concentrated in the smaller, the less populated red states. But that means that there are more red states than blue states when it comes down to a single vote in the House of Representatives for president. So we definitely don't want the House of Representatives to decide. It would be, quite honestly, undemocratic. Can a January 6th happen again? You'll all remember that what happened on January 6th is that Trump and his MAGA crowd was trying to disrupt and threaten and intimidate Congress into not certifying the electoral votes. That's what happens every January 6th. We've never noticed before because we hadn't ever had to worry about it before. But you'll be glad to hear that when Biden got into the presidency and the Democrats had both the House and the Senate, they rewrote the Electoral Count Act. Again, actually with bipartisan support. There were plenty of Republicans that thought that we should tighten up the process. So there are a lot of fixes in that particular bill that makes it a lot harder, not impossible, but a lot harder for January 6th to happen. For example, before, it only took a single House member and a single senator to object to certifying a state's votes, in which case now, because of the fixes, it takes 20% of the House and 20% of the Senate to agree to not certify a state's electoral vote. So is it possible? Yes, but it's much, much harder. The second thing is the rules still apply. They go back, they debate, then they come and take a vote. So if the Democrats have the majority of the Senate and a majority of the House, or even one chamber, as long as we have the majority in one chamber, the electoral votes will be counted, they will be certified, and we will be able to move forward with the presidential election. Is there an alternative to the Electoral College? Well, like I said before, you're going to need a constitutional amendment to change it. But there is a workaround that's gaining steam. It's called the National Popular Vote Compact. The idea is it works with the language that's currently in the Constitution, Article 2, about the Electoral College, the whole winner-takes-all idea. But what it does is instead of each state's popular vote counting separately, what it would do is it ties the states together that have agreed to the National Popular Vote Compact, and they say that all of their votes will go to whoever wins the national popular vote as opposed to the state's popular vote. Okay, so the national popular vote would be how those states decide who gets their electoral college vote. That topic really needs its own video, so if you're interested in learning more about how the National Popular Vote Compact works, I want you to head over to my blog. I've put the link down in the description below, and you can read all about how it works and which states have already signed on. Of course, I want to hear from all of you as I get this YouTube channel started. So if you have any questions about the Electoral College, drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. I'd also love to hear from you if there's any topics that you would like me to dig into as I get this YouTube channel started. I love doing explainers, so if anything happens in the news or you're curious about an election that's coming up, let me know what's on your mind and I may very well pick your topic to do a video on. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you next time.